Hello, everyone. Jared Hoffman here with another edition of the Better Than Less Than podcast. Thank you all for tuning in once again. Hopefully, my internet ain't acting up like it was last week, and I have a smooth show this week. But I just want to first start off by saying Happy Juneteenth for all my brothers and sisters out there. I hope everybody is living their unapologetically Black life and just enjoying the fruits of your labor. I know that we've had a lot of hardships in our lives. We've seen some things that may deter us from living our best life, but I understand that God is with you and that we are in the skin that we're in because God believed that we fit the mold for what it means to be Black. And I hope that you all are representative of what it means to be Black and what this day means to us, having a, a resemblance of freedom and yeah, just having the confidence and the swagger that comes with being us and being in the skin that we're in. But I hope that we hopefully we have you've had a great day and yeah, just representing for everything that we have stood for all of our lives. You see, I'm representing my alma mater right now. Hopefully you guys are rocking your paraphernalia. You all the Divine Nine. Hopefully y'all stepping out for us and representing for us on this day. But please, if you can, leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and subscribe to become a level 1, 2, or 3 member for all the exclusive content from the HBCU sports team. And you can follow us on all of our social media platforms. We're on all of them: Twitter, X. Or I see Chris Stevens in the chat. He calls Twitter the Musty app. So get on the Musty app with us. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of that. We're there. TikTok, all of those stuff. And you can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU sports. Now, we're here, as you can see by the title. We are talking about Division II HBCU football. The HBCU football season is coming up. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. So we're gonna highlight 5 teams that you need to watch for this upcoming season. But first of all, let's give a recap to what happened in the 2024 Division II HBCU football season. Starting in the CIAA, Virginia Union came out on top once again, the second straight CIAA championship, led by Jada Byers, who had another record-breaking season, finished with 2,000 plus yards and moved into the number 1 spot for Virginia Union in terms of career rushing yards, and I believe also broke his own record for rushing yards in the game. I'm not sure if that was last season or I believe he did that. I think he did that against us, against Bowie State. So yeah, but now, well, we'll get into more about Virginia Union later. But they beat Virginia State, who had a turnaround season in their second, I believe, second or third season under Dr. Henry Frazier. So Virginia Union is going for the vaunted three-peat. That does not happen often in the CIAA. I believe the last time it happened was Winston-Salem State in the 80s. So they're going for that major accomplishment. Again, more on Virginia Union later. And in the SIAC, it was the Miles Golden Bears who took home the SIAC championship, their first conference title since 2019. They beat the turnaround Clark Atlanta Panthers to do that in their first season under Teddy Keaton, who came from Allen University, to lead that team from 0-10 last year, the previous year, to a SIAC championship berth. So Teddy Keaton looking to replicate that success this year. Meanwhile, for for Miles, they are going to be building without their former head coach, Sam Shade, the man who turned around Miles from a 1-9 team in his first year to 7-3 the next year, and then went undefeated in conference play this last season, leading them to a conference championship. And he's now at Alabama A&M. So things going to be wide open in the SIAC. There's going to be a lot of teams to look out for. A couple of teams you'll see on this list. But there's a lot of parity going on in both conferences. As I mentioned before, Virginia Union, they no longer have Jada Byers, Clark Atlanta. They conceivably will be without David Wright III, who apparently was denied eligibility So yeah, that they will be moving forward with. Spoiler alert: Clark Atlanta's not on this list, so I can talk about them. But they are a team that you should look out for, absolutely, because they will have Zy McDonald, who will be coming from Jackson State, and he will be working with Jamal Jones, and Jamal Jones will have the keys to the city in the receiving core for Clark Atlanta, because Amanda will talk about in a second transferred to another team that we will talk about later on. So it'll be the Zy McDonald show for Clark Atlanta, and he will at least have Jamal Jones to work with. I'm not sure about the status of Virgil Young, if he's still with the team or not. I haven't seen anything on from that front, but at worst, he'll have Jamal Jones with him. At best, he could potentially have Jamal Jones and Virgil Young, in which case you should not sleep on Clark Atlanta this upcoming season. But yeah, let's just get into it. Just want to start off with an honorable mention. I know we're talking about Division II HBCU football teams, but I got to highlight an NAIA team that I think we should look out for, and that is Langston. Now, Langston had a fairly good season last year, weren't much of a contender, when it comes to in the Sooner Athletic Conference. But they had some impressive showings. Torrance Bartle, who is a transfer from, I want to say Jackson State it was that he came from, whichever school it was. I don't think he stepped on the field for them, but he had some impressive games for them, the quarterback for Langston. And yeah, they had some impressive showings. And Quentin Morgan is somebody that a lot of people thought could have been on his way to the FCS. He was campaigning for, well, I don't know if he was campaigning, but it was widely known that he wanted to move up for a Division I coaching job. So this is going to be his audition tape. Getting Langston to that championship level. They haven't been there in a while. They haven't been in an NAIA national tournament in a while. They haven't even won a Sooner Athletic Conference championship in a while. So if he wants to improve his resume and potentially get that Division I coaching job, his first step is getting Langston to national championship contention, which starts with getting them the conference championship contention, where they haven't been in a while. So, and also Texas College. I also want to talk about Texas College, because that's another honorable mention, a team that, if anybody knows about Texas College, they are a team that when you watch them, you're wondering how much they're going to lose by. They have had a reputation for losing. They have gone many years without wins in a season. And last year, under head coach Jarrell Jackson, I believe it was his third season with Texas College, he led them to a 7-3 record. And that is absolutely unheard of for a team that you don't know if they're where a win is going to come for them in some years. The fact that he led them to 7 wins was absolutely extraordinary. That's Jarrell Jackson, head coach Jarrell Jackson is another coach that I believe will be in some Division I coaching sweepstakes, going into next year. And this is going to be his audition tape. We're going to have to see if this was a fluke or not. Texas College had a special offense last year. Is that still there, or was this fool's gold? Maybe it was real, but you're gonna have to do it years over to prove that this is who you actually are, And it's unfair because it's a Texas College team that hasn't had a reputation for winning much, but that's the name of the game when it comes to this to coaching sweepstakes. You got to show that you've had sustained levels of success if you want to continue to move up, especially when you're at a level that the people at the Division I ranks don't respect. We saw how Florida A&M treated Patrick Crary, their basketball coach, who was coming from a lower level where he won a national championship. Once again, I should remind you, so if you want to get that respect from the Division I ranks and be in line for one of those head coaching jobs, you got to show sustained levels of success. And that's what Jarrell Jackson and Quentin Morgan will have to prove this upcoming season. So those are two teams at the NAIA level that I think you should look out for. All right, now let's get into the list. Usually I do it alphabetical order, but because we're doing this live on the stream, I will be ranking these. So these are my top 5 teams that I think that you should have your eyes on going into the Division II HBCU football season. Starting with number 5, we have Fort Valley State. Now, Fort Valley State is entering their first season without former head coach Sean Gibbs, who is now with his former team, North Carolina A&T, where he was a running backs coach and famously coached guys like Tariq Cohen and Jesus, the, gosh, oh man, I forgot his name. I'm so mad at myself for that. But he was the running back coach for North Carolina A&T, and now he will be stepping in as head coach for North Carolina A&T and Fort Valley State. They will be under the services, and again, I'm forgetting names. Forgetting the name of the head coach that they hired in this place. But wait a minute. We're doing this live. Marlon Watson is the new head coach for Fort Valley State. And like I mentioned before, this is a wide open SIAC. So if there was any year for a new head coach to come in and have an immediate impact, this could potentially be the year for Marlon Watson in Fort Valley State. I'm not entirely sure on the status of Brandon Marshall, their all-purpose back from last season. I do know they will be without Kelvin Durham, and we'll talk about why they'll be without Kelvin Durham later on in this list. But many of the players that they had last season that were big-time contributors for them are now gone. Brandon Marshall's gone. DeJuan Bell, who was their big-time return and receiver, their big play receiver, he's now gone. Adion Farmer, he's now gone. He's at Florida A&M. So the big-time defender, Adion Farmer, he's at Florida A&M. So many of their big contributors from last season that helped Sean Gibbs catapult his way to North Carolina A&T, they're all now gone. So the question is now, who will step up for Fort Valley State and continue to build on what they have been doing the past couple of years? They seem like they have been so close for the past couple of years, and they just have not been able to get over the hump, whether it's a Benedict who's been in their way, or a Miles who's been in their way, or not being able to get past Albany State in the Fountain City Classic. They've had a losing streak in that game, or when they won the game, it didn't matter because they were already eliminated from SIAC championship contention. So with this being a wide open year, it's a year of trying to figure out their identity, but it could also be a year that they can put themselves in SIAC championship contention, being that this conference is so wide open. As I mentioned before, so many teams have gone through turnover with, even Tuskegee, who was a team that could have been featured on this list. Many of their big defenders entered the transfer portal and moved up to the Division I level. You got Miles, who I also mentioned before, who has a new coach coming in, and many of their players from their championship team, namely Trevonta Abner, their star tight end, they're now at Alabama A&M, back with their former head coach Sam Shade. So with all the turnover brings parity, and that could be Fort Valley State's opportunity to figure out an identity and turn it into a championship. But who knows? Clark Atlanta could end up being the team that we saw them be last year, with Zy McDonald at the helm. The only reason I didn't put Clark Atlanta on here is because, yes, they're absolutely a team that you need to watch, but I'm curious about Zy McDonald. He hasn't had the opportunity to have a full year where he is the team starting quarterback. He has played second fiddle to Jake. I don't want to say second fiddle. I don't want to say that. But he has been the backup to Jacobian Morgan, and he has played in spurts. And he's looked good in spurts. But you have the keys to the kingdom with Clark Atlanta now. I don't know what that's going to look like. Now, you do have at least one piece with you in Jamal Jones. I don't know if Virgil Young will be there as well, but you at least have one big piece who could be in for a SIAC Player of the Year type of year in Jamal Jones with you. But that's not enough for me to really say that this is a team that you should keep your eye on. Will they be in the picture? Absolutely, they will be. I at least think that Teddy Keaton is a great enough coach that he can corral his troops and get them in a position to be a contender in the SIAC, especially with it being so much parity in the conference. But I'm not sure if that was enough to really warrant them being put on this list. It kind of sounds hypocritical because I put Fort Valley State on this list and they had so much turnover this last season. But with them moving on from Sean Gibbs, like their years of consistency is the reason why I featured Fort Valley State. This is a team that they just pop running backs. They have running backs pop up like they're just like they have them in a storage unit or something. Like they had Brandon Marshall last year. Before that, they had Emmanuel Wilson, who's now with the Green Bay Packers. They just always seem to find those running backs who make an immediate impact for them. So I'm curious to see who they have in the tuck ready to continue these years of consistency for them. So Fort Valley State, number 5 on my list. Number 4, we have Winston-Salem State. Now, Winston-Salem State, this was a year of improvement for them as well in their, I want to say, 4th season under head coach Robert Massey. They had their first winning years since 2018. They finished 7-3. We're just barely out of the contention for a CIAA championship, but a couple of losses down the stretch to Johnson C. Smith, and I believe they also lost to Fayetteville State, if I'm not mistaken. It kind of did them in and ruined their chances for an SIAC championship. I talked to Richard Massey ahead of their season kickoff in the Red Tails Classic. I'm about to say Orange Tails, wrong color. Red Tails Classic, and he is very confident in his quarterback. Dalen Lee says that he is one of the best quarterbacks in HBCU football. Go back and it's on the channel. So if you want to watch that interview, it's on a previous live from in the Better Than Less Than catalog. But yeah, he's very confident in Dalen Lee's ability to be a top quarterback in HBCU football, and Winston-Salem State will surely be in the mix. I know everybody is looking at Johnson C. Smith, Virginia Union, and Virginia State. That's the three-headed monster that everybody is expecting to be in the championship picture. But Winston-Salem State absolutely has that ability as well. Last year was not their best year. I feel like the best is ahead of them right now, and they lost the Union. Right, it was Union. They did beat Fayetteville State. Thank you, Kim. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you also, Ellis, for the correction. That's why I like y'all, man. Y'all knowledgeable. Y'all correcting me when my old brain is forgetting. So I appreciate y'all for the correction. It absolutely was Union and Johnson C. Smith that they lost to last year. But yeah, I think that Winston-Salem State is absolutely right on the doorstep. But hold on, I lost my train of thought for a second. Winston-Salem State, I think that they hung their head last year on defense and were much better defensively, and they also had some good offensive talent. Trevon Hester was a dynamic back for them last year, and he will certainly be a big part of.
Scan has completed. Warning: issues have been.
See, that's what happens when you do things live. Yeah, things like that happen to you. But yeah, Jesus, all this stuff is making me lose my train of thought. Winston-Salem State, they had Trayvon Hester, who was a dynamic back for them last year, and will be a key to them getting to that championship, getting back to that championship level that they have been in previous decades. You look at any decade, you'll see Winston-Salem State in the championship picture. It's not often that they go years without at least appearing in a championship game. And we're halfway through this decade and they still haven't been there yet. They're peaking at the right time though. So I think that they just have to get above the Johnson C. Smiths, the Unions, and the States. So, and if you look at their schedule, they they have Union at home, they have Johnson C. Smith on the road. So those are gonna be two hurdles that they're gonna have to jump if they want to get into CIAA championship contention. But I think they're trending in the right direction, and I think that this could be a year that maybe they won't be in the CIAA championship game, but they will give uh, Johnson C. Smith and Virginia Union, and they also have Virginia State on the schedule. So they're going to be put through the ringer if they in their hopes for a CIAA championship berth, and I think they have what it takes to give these teams some trouble, especially Virginia State, because we don't. There's a lot to be settled with Virginia State. Are will they be able to keep up their production that they've had the past couple of years? Each year Virginia State has gotten better, but are the teams in competition with them starting to catch up? Is Livingstone, who also had a great year last year, with that secondary led by Kevin Larkins Jr., have they caught up to Virginia State now? Has Winston-Salem State caught up to them? Those are going to be questions that we have to ask. Has Shaw caught up to them? They're going to be speaking of Virginia State. Their former defensive coordinator is now the head coach of Shaw, or was it their offensive coordinator? I need my fact checkers in the comments to help me out with that. but a big piece of Virginia State's coaching staff is now a head coach of Shaw, and I believe that he will be a big part of Shaw finally realizing its full potential and putting itself in the CIAA championship race. So, yeah, I figured it was OC too, Kim. Thank you for that. He said that he believed it was the OC. Matter of fact, let's do this live. We're gonna fact check myself because I talked about it and I said that was a great hire. Them getting the guy from Virginia State on their coaches. Lamar Manigo. Yeah. He was, the OC, absolutely. So, yeah, and I thought that was a great hire for them because he, with Jamil Williams in the backfield, he had a big year for them, and he was a big reason why they were in the CIAA championship game last year. And I think he will have a profound impact on Shaw, and that leaves you to question: has Virginia State's window closed into being a championship contender? I don't think so. I have full belief in Dr. Henry Frazier's ability to get the most out of this team and to continue to put them on the trajectory that they have been on. WSSU's DC was going to take a shot at the job since he is a Shaw alum. Yeah, that would have been a good hire, especially with a lot of Winston-Salem State's key defenders from last year now being gone. Justin Fleming is gone, and there's another guy that I'm trying to think. Hold on, I'm looking it up now. Jamison Austin. I'm not sure if he's still there. He had a very good year in his transferring from Bluefield State. So yeah, that would have been a very good. That would have been a great hire for Shaw. Either one of those, but I like Lamar Manigo, and I think he's going to have a profound impact on Shaw. But bringing it back to Winston-Salem State, that's a lot of competition to have to go after. He had enough. So he's still there. WSU Ram Nation, you're saying Austin is still there? If he is, then that's going to be big for Winston-Salem State also, and why they will be a team to watch this upcoming year. But that's number 4, Winston-Salem State. Number 3, we have Albany State. Now, Albany State is another team that was one game away. They were one game away. They lost in their penultimate game of the season. I believe it was against Savannah State that they lost to. But we need to get better on defense. Hey, look, with the offensive talent that the CIAA has, we continue to crank out offensive talent. So you can never go wrong with continuing to upgrade on defense. So yeah, that's absolutely a valid point. But getting back to Albany State, they were one game out. Had they won that game against Savannah State, which wasn't it was a nail biter. That was one that could have gone either way, and it went against Albany State, and that's unfortunate because they ended up winning the Fountain City Classic the next week against Fort Valley State, and a win that could have put them in the SIAC championship game. But because they lost to Savannah State, that eliminated them from contention. And Clark Atlanta capitalized winning the battle at the AUC and put themselves in the SIAC championship game. And we all know what happened to Clark Atlanta in the SIAC championship game. No need to talk about that though. But Clark Atlanta, excuse me, Jesus. Albany State. Albany State is set up for a breakout year. They have a young running back who was the freshman of the year last year in the SIAC, Tyant Weish. Big things are coming for that young man. I think that he will be a contender for the Deacon Jones Trophy. He will be a contender for the Harlan Hill Trophy. And I think it's no question he's going to be in contention for the SIC Player of the Year. He was an all-purpose back for Albany State last year in just his freshman season. So I can only imagine what he's going to develop into in his second year. And then you got that Isaiah Knowles is still there. You have that their leading receiver Jamil Williams is still there. A team that made their bones on their defense, they're starting to get strong on offense. The defense you always know is going to be there. They always get consistent level of production from their defense. But the question has been, can their offense put them over the hump and make them a true national championship contender? I think they have an offense that can make them a threat if they were to get past the SIAC in the Division II tournament. This is an offense that can be very high-powered. I don't think they will be the most high-powered offense in Division II football. Again, another spoiler for later on in my list. But I think Tyant Weish could, and I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong, Mr. Weish, but I think that he will have a big year. Isaiah Knowles will be in contention for the SIC Player of the Year, arguably the best returning quarterback in Division II football. Of all the quarterbacks who are returning to their team from last season, I think he might be the best out of all of them. Because how many quarterbacks are returning from last year? I think Kevin Taylor from Bowie is going to be back this year. Dalen Lee, we spoke about with Winston-Salem State, is coming back this year. But David Wright III, he's out. And I'm blanking on other quarterbacks, but I think he might actually be the best returning quarterback from Division II HBCU football. And I think he will for sure be a SIC Player of the Year contender. And don't be surprised if you see him set some season marks, some single season marks for Albany State this year. He could become their all-time leading passer. I don't know what the career records are for Albany State, but I'd have to assume he's pretty close because he's been there for a while. So, but yeah, I see Albany State. They have inched closer and closer each year to SIAC championship contention under Quinn Gray. They were in the SIAC championship game the year before last. They ended up losing to Benedict that year in what was Chennis Berry's last season as head coach of Benedict. But this year is wide open, and they might be the best team on paper in the SIC going into this year. I have them as my favorite to win the SIC this year. I can't overlook all the offensive talent that they have. And yeah, there's too many questions on other teams. This is a team that has an established core on offense, and they have an established coach who has gotten them to the big game before. So I'd be hard pressed to say that anybody else is a favorite over Albany State. So look out for Albany State to potentially be playing for the conference championship in November, and potentially be in a Division II national tournament. And could end up winning the game if they play their cards right. So Albany State number 3. Number 2, we have the defending CIAA champion Virginia Union Panthers. And of course, as we already talked about, Jada Byers, the record-setting back who set many records with Virginia Union, set the single game record for rushing yards in the season initially against Valdosta State with 319 rushing yards. But I believe it was last year that he broke that record against Bowie State. I think ran for 336 yards or something like that. Astronomical number. But also last year set the single season record for rushing yards in the season, rushed for over 2,000 yards, and set the career record for Virginia Union for career rushing yards. Broke Andre Braxton's 25-year-old record, and surpassing that. I believe he was close to 6,000 yards for his career, but I think he fell just short of that. But it's either but yeah, Virginia Union, they're moving on from the Jada Byers experience, and also you can't overlook they're also moving on from Isaac Anderson, who was their star defensive lineman. So not only are you moving on from your best offensive player, you're moving on from your best defensive player. And you have the luxury of still having Dr. Alvin Parker. I thought that he should have been a guy that was in contention for some Division I coaching jobs. Yeah, everybody, including me. I'm very glad that Jada Byers is gone. I hope that he does well at the pro level, but I thank the Lord that he is not terrorizing my team and the other teams in the CIAA. But but now with Jada Byers being gone, that opens up the floodgates for Curtis Allen to potentially have a breakout year. Curtis Allen last year was, in the past 3 years, has been a sleeping giant for the Virginia Union Panthers, has been the backup running back to Jada Byers, has had some spectacular games for Virginia Union, including in last year's playoff win against Lenore Ryan, which got them to the regional final. He and Jada Byers rushed for over 100 yards in that game and was just getting everything that they wanted. They just got whatever they wanted. But now Curtis Allen is shifting to be the focal point of the offense. He's had a 2-game stretch where he was able to try it out as the starting running back in 2023 when Jada Byers was going through some injuries. So he had a 2-game stretch where he was able to be the starting running back. I believe against Fayetteville State, and it was somebody else that he started against in that 2023 season, and had 150 plus yards, 150 plus rushing yards in each of those games. So that's your sample size for Curtis Allen as a starting running back. And if that's the sample size that we have, and he can bring that into this year, then the sky's the limit for what he and Virginia Union could potentially do. But my question is, will that pressure? It was Livingstone. Thank you, WSSU Ram Nation. It was Livingstone that he also did it against. But so the question is, what will Curtis Allen be like? Because it's one thing to be is Mark Wright coming back? If that's true, then that's big for them. If he's coming back as well, having another guy who was a part of that championship roster to be with them, because and I also need to see if Reginald Vick is coming back as well, because if Reginald Vick, who was unstoppable against, am I thinking of the right team? I think I'm thinking of the right team. But yeah, if Mark Wright is coming back, that would be huge, and that would be very helpful for Curtis Allen in his first starting campaign. Having a quarterback that he's familiar with, and in an offense that I'm also sure that he's very familiar with under Diego Rowland, who is another guy that I think should be in line for some head coaching jobs. But yeah, I would not be shocked to see Curtis Allen win the CIAA Player of the Year award. I think he's it wouldn't. It also wouldn't. It would not be shocking to see him lead them in rushing. It wouldn't be shocking to see him among the top rushers in the company. I mean, company in the country. So, yeah, just yeah. I think Virginia Union. It's not outside the realm of possibility to see them win 3 straight, but they will have a lot of competition from the number one team on my list, and that is Johnson C. Smith. Now, Johnson C. Smith, there's no way to sugarcoat it. There's no way to try to lessen the blow. Last year, it ended horribly for them. They started amazing, 8-0 at the start of the season, and were clicking on all cylinders, looking like they were going to be the favorite to take home the CIAA championship. But things just completely fell off a cliff once they got to game number 9 against Fayetteville State. Could not do a thing with Fayetteville State. Got shut out in that game, and everything that could go wrong in that game did go wrong. They still had a chance to make it to the CIAA championship game in their season finale against Livingstone, but again, they just didn't have it, and they lost that game. And Virginia State beat Virginia Union to clinch what would have been Johnson C. Smith's spot in the CIAA championship game. So Johnson C. Smith is coming into this season with a chip on their shoulder. And when you have a chip on your shoulder, it's great to have it's big. It's really important to have a great off season to take a little bit of that pressure off of you. And boy, did Johnson C. Smith have a great off season. You know, they unfortunately lost Darius Ocean to the transfer portal, but that was only after they were able to get Kelvin Durham from Fort Valley State, who I previously talked about, he was either SIAC preseason offensive player of the year, or he was a SIAC offensive player of the year. I believe he was a former preseason offensive player of the year in the SIAC. But he now comes to Johnson C. Smith, and he has a duo of receivers who could catapult this Johnson C. Smith offense to one of the best that we've seen in recent memory. Not only do you have Brevin Caldwell, who was a 1,000-yard receiver this year, you now have Armon Harris, who was a 1,000-yard receiver with Clark Atlanta, and you have Kamaro Edmonds, who was out of the backfield with Johnson C. Smith. This is a team that previously, hung their hat on defense. Benari Black, who's no longer with Johnson C. Smith, and Jack Smith, one of the best linebacker duos we had in HBCU football last year. I'm not sure if Jack Smith is still there, but I do know, Benari Black is gone, but with so much uncertainty on defense and as to who is going to be the next person in line to continue the success that Johnson C. Smith defensive unit has had, this offense is proven, and I am just very excited to see what they are going to produce. It's not going to be easy, even with all of them having that talent, you still got to get the chemistry down. You still have to get the playbook down, and you got to find your identity and the type of players the plays that you want to make, what your strengths and weaknesses are. You still have to get all of that down. But with Maurice Flowers as your head coach, I have no doubt that Johnson C. Smith could potentially have one of the best offenses that we've seen in Division II football in a long time. I don't know if there's much more to say than that. Johnson C. Smith had a disappointing year last year. I think they're going to make teams pay in the CIAA this year. I wouldn't be surprised if Kelvin Durham was in contention for the Deacon Jones Trophy. There hasn't been a Division II winner. Well, last year there was a Division II winner, but there hasn't been a Division II quarterback to win it since a guy that went to this school won it 2 years in a row, that being Amir Hall. Shout out to Amir. But I think Kelvin Durham could potentially be in line for the Deacon Jones Trophy in either of the receivers. Um, they beat they beat WSSU and then turned back into Johnson C. Smith. That's cold. But yeah, what was I saying? Uh, Brevin Caldwell or Armand Harris could potentially be in contention for the Deacon Jones Trophy as well. Could be in contention for the Harlan Hill Trophy. So I'm just really excited to see what Johnson C. Smith has in store. If they're able to put it together, this could be something historic that we have not seen in a long time. We've seen dominant offenses before. I don't want to give WSSU Ram Nation too many compliments, but his Rams from 2012, we know about that offense and how dynamic they were. Not to toot my alma mater's own horn, but under Amir Hall, we had some great years. Even a year that we didn't win the CIAA championship in 2017, I put that offense against any offense that we've seen in the past couple of years. So and even Virginia Union's offense under in the Jada Byers years. We've seen some great offenses in the past in the CIAA, but Johnson C. Smith, they have the opportunity to do something special, and I just hope that they're able to realize their full potential. So those are my teams that you should watch out for in the Division II football season, HBCU football season this year. Number 5, Fort Valley State. Number 4, Winston-Salem State. Number 3, Albany State. Number 2, Virginia Union. And number 1, it is Johnson C. Smith. So yeah, now all we have to do is wait. we have about 2 months before we get the Division II HBCU football season started with the Black College Football Hall of Fame class. Is that the game? The first game? I don't know if that's the first game, but it's the first marquee game. First marquee game of the Division II HBCU football season will be the Black College Football Hall of Fame Classic, where the 2 reigning conference champions, Miles and Virginia Union, will go at it at Canton, Ohio, in Hall of Fame Stadium. And then you have the Red Tails Classic, where Winston-Salem State will play against Tuskegee, 2 historic HBCU football programs, especially at the Division II level, but in HBCU football in general, they are 2 historic programs, and they will do battle in the Red Tails Classic. So we're just really excited. We're counting down the start of the Division II HBCU football season and the HBCU football season in general. We ain't gonna talk about the Division Ones because that's not what this show's for. You can always go to the MEAC and More podcast with Chris Stevens for that. He usually does those on Wednesdays, and the SWAC Page podcast when they do those with Ken Rashad and Kendrick Marshall. Whenever they're not bickering about when they're going to do it, it's usually on Fridays. So you can always tune into those podcasts for the Division Ones. But here we talk about Division Twos and NAIAs, and I appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you can, please, again, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. You can subscribe to become a level 1, 2, or 3 member to get the exclusive content from the HBCU sports team. You can follow us on all of our social platforms. We are on Twitter, X, or as Chris Stevens calls it, the Musty app. You go to Facebook, you can go to Instagram, you can go to LinkedIn, all of those, the TikTok, we're on that too. And you can always go to hbcusports.com for all the latest news in HBCU sports. And with that being said, happy Juneteenth, and we'll see you guys next time.